Hello, Read Through the Word friends. Today is April 20th, and spring is finally here. I am so grateful, and I am so glad to be here with you today. I just wanted to take a minute to say thank you for all the wonderful comments that you left for me last week. I read every single one of them. I loved reading them. I loved hearing and learning more about you. And I was so encouraged. I loved learning what impacted you, what you enjoyed learning about, and just thank you for making me feel so welcome. And I'm super glad to be here with you and to continue to connect with you. So today, we are moving on after Saul and Jonathan have died in battle. And I wonder what it must have been like for David, the grief that he felt. And I think his grief may have been complicated. We know, of course, Jonathan, his dear beloved friend, I'm sure the grief was just so immense for David to grieve his friend, Jonathan. I wonder if his grief was a little bit more complicated for Saul. And I know that sometimes when someone passes away that we still loved, but that maybe we had a complicated or difficult relationship with, grief can be complicated too. And I'm guessing that grief was complicated for David. He, I think maybe thought back to when he and Saul got along together. And I am sure he also thought, well, I'm not running for my life anymore now that he's gone. I don't know. I think it was complex. I think David's grief also wasn't naive or unrealistic in that he knew what Saul's death meant. It meant that his kingship was coming, right? So lots of things probably going on for David. And we don't know how much time passed. It just said in the course of time that David sought out the Lord and the Lord told him to go to Hebron. So he and his family and his men and all his men's family go and settle in Hebron. And I want to talk about Hebron for just a minute because it's actually a pretty significant geographic location. If you remember back to Genesis 13, this is where Abraham lived for a while. It is where he settled for a while. It said among the great trees of Mamre. It was where he was visited by angels and the Lord to promise him a son. It was also where he purchased a cave as a burial site for his family. And actually, to this day, Jews consider this, it's called the cave or the tomb of the patriarchs. This cave and this city are considered the second holiest site in Israel. So it was significant city then, and it's still significant now. It also, later on, once Joshua led the people back into the promised land or to the promised land, Joshua leads the people to fight and to conquer Hebron. And then Caleb, in reward for his bravery, is given Hebron. And it could be because back when the spies had spied out that area in the valley of Eshcol, they brought back that big cluster of grapes. That was most likely in that area too. So lots of significance around this city. Oddly enough, later on, we're going to see when Absalom tries to steal the throne from David, he goes and sets up his quarters at Hebron. He sets up his headquarters there. And I am going to link for you. I found this great article at gotquestions.org. Again, talking about this and a little bit more about the city of Hebron. I will link that for you in the notes. So geographically, definitely an important city. So it wasn't just randomly chosen. There's definitely history there and meaning. So David's in Hebron. and the men of Judah anoint him king. And there's still resistance to David's kingship, because around the same time, Abner, who was Saul's commander, takes Saul's son Ishbosheth, and bear with me, there's a lot of different names today that I'm going to try to get right, so bear with me. Takes Saul's son Ishbosheth to Mahanaim, and Abner anoints him king there. I'm sure David and his men weren't real happy about this. So once again, there's fighting. There's contention, right? And also interesting is that Saul's commander Abner was related to him, and David's commander Joab was, I guess you would say Joab, was related to him. So these are not just military ties, these are close family ties. And I think that plays out now and in things to come. But here we have Abner and his army, Joab for David and his army. And they get together at Gibeon, and they're going to fight this out. They're going to fight this out to defend who they think should be king. And Abner and his men are being defeated. And Joab's brother, Asahel, does something foolish. He decides to go after Abner. He's swift-footed, it says, and he's quick, so he goes after him. So again, continuing the fighting, right? So he goes after Abner, and Abner says something so interesting to me. Abner turns and he says to Asahel, he says, "Stop chasing me. Why should I strike you down? How could I look your brother Joab in the face?" Now, that's not your typical battle cry. I think a lot of times in the Old Testament, we're used to seeing just ruthless, violent, bloody things. And, someone's head is cut off and displayed for the whole town to see. And, and here's Abner saying to his enemy, "I don't want to kill you." I think that's really telling. And as we go a bit further down, I can't forget to make note, Asahel does not listen. He doesn't listen to Abner. He keeps pursuing him, and Abner ends up killing Asahel. It's very sad. So Asahel's brother Joab and Joab's other brother go after Abner, and the fighting continues. And once again, Abner says something interesting. They're all getting ready to fight again. And Abner calls out to Joab and he says, "Must the sword devour forever? Don't you realize that this will end in bitterness? How long before you order your men to stop pursuing your brothers?" So there's something going on here in this story that we're not necessarily seeing, but there is something between these groups of men where I don't know that they want to kill each other, and yet that's how they're solving it. It's very interesting, isn't it? And this story made me think about the church today sometimes. That I wonder if there's times where we just want to plant ourselves in what we just determine is right. And we kind of gather around our own Gibeon. And we're willing to sort of go to the end for what we feel is right. Now, to be clear, Asahel was fighting for David's honor, right? David was supposed to be anointed king. David was the king that God chose, and it was right for David to be anointed king. But there was nothing honorable about the way that Asahel went about defending David's name. And I wonder if sometimes, as I said, we do gather around our own Gibeon, and we end up causing division and strife and even bring bitterness over something that God did not intend there to be bitterness and division about. It is really important that we stand up against deception and against evil and against abuse in the church. So it is very important that we stand against these things and stand up for those who have been wounded by these things. Sometimes I wonder if instead of bandaging the wounded, we can cause further wounds. And I don't know if any of you have experienced that. In my own personal life, I went through a pretty difficult, probably somewhat traumatic experience. And in the midst of that, I ended up experiencing some judgment, some pretty harsh judgment. But it taught me something. As I walked through that, I began to reflect on how I had handled things in the past. And I realized that there were times that my desire to be right about certain things ended up hurting people. And that the grace and the love of Jesus that should have come through for people ended up coming out as harsh criticism instead. And I really grieved that. But I really thanked God for, even though my experience was not good, I really thank God for just the way he spoke to me through that experience. That people have a story and their story matters. And we as a church can be binding up wounds instead of causing further bitterness with our brothers and sisters in Jesus. And so I don't know if that resonates with any of you. I just wanted to encourage you today that as for me, I guess I'm still learning, and maybe you're still learning too, as I dig into the scriptures and want to learn and grow and find all that I can, that the words of this text are used for the healing and for the uniting of us as the church, and that we would ask ourselves that question, is this in the end going to cause more bitterness? So I hope that resonated with you today, friend. I am so glad that you're here, and I am just so thankful that Jesus is so gracious and so loving with us. And I just pray that as we study the scriptures more, that love of Jesus and the healing that he has for people would just pour through us to others. Thanks for joining me today here, friends, and we will see you next time on Read Through the Word.